You have 5 minutes to get your wife off my property, or I'm calling the police to drag her away. The HOA president stood on my ranch driveway, pointing at my wife Sarah like she was some kind of criminal. Sarah was sitting peacefully in her wheelchair by our garden pond, feeding the ducks we'd rescued 3 months ago. She looked up with confused, innocent eyes, not understanding why this stranger was screaming at her. "Ma'am, this is our property," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "My wife isn't bothering anyone." "Your property?" Karen laughed, a cold, harsh sound. "That pond area is HOA jurisdiction according to the new boundary amendments. And that woman is creating an unsanitary condition with those disease-carrying birds." My heart started pounding as I watched Sarah's face crumple with hurt. She'd been through so much already: the car accident, the wheelchair, the long months of recovery. This garden pond and her rescued ducks were the first things that had brought joy back to her life. 5 minutes. Karen continued, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling 911 right now. She's trespassing and creating a public health hazard. I have documentation that your wife is mentally incompetent and shouldn't be unsupervised around water." I felt my blood turn to ice. This woman was about to call the police on my disabled wife for the crime of sitting in her own backyard. Karen started dialing 911, her manicured fingers moving with cruel efficiency. "Emergency services? Yes, I need immediate police response. We have a mentally disabled woman who's been left unsupervised near water and is refusing to leave community property." What this power-drunk HOA Karen didn't know was that she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. Because while I'd been keeping quiet about my job for the past year, trying to give Sarah a peaceful recovery, I wasn't just some random rancher she could push around. I was Detective Lieutenant Marcus Webb, and I was about to show her what happens when you threaten a cop's wife. But first, let me tell you how we got here, because this story is about more than just an HOA bully. It's about love, healing, and what happens when someone tries to destroy the one thing that's bringing your wife back to life. Sarah and I had bought this small ranch in Texas Hill Country 8 months ago, right after the accident that changed everything. She'd been a kindergarten teacher, full of life and laughter, until a drunk driver ran a red light and shattered both her spine and our future. The doctors said she'd never walk again. Worse than that, the brain injury had left her with what they called cognitive processing delays. She could still think and feel and love, but sometimes she struggled with words or got confused about time, or forgot things that used to be easy. The pond wasn't much, just a small water feature the previous owners had built for their grandkids. But when Sarah saw those abandoned ducklings by the roadside 3 months ago, something lit up in her eyes for the first time since the accident. "Can we save them, Marcus?" she'd asked, her words slow but determined. "They need someone to take care of them." Those 6 little ducklings became Sarah's world. She'd wheel herself out to the pond every morning, talking to them in the gentle voice she used to use with her students. She'd read to them from children's books, tell them stories, and slowly, day by day, I watched my wife coming back to life. The ducks grew from tiny yellow fluff balls into beautiful white adults who followed Sarah around like she was their mother. Which, in every way that mattered, she was. Karen Mitchell had moved into the Meadowbrook Estates development that bordered our property about 4 months ago. The subdivision was one of those places where every house looked identical and every resident seemed to think they were living in a gated palace instead of a cookie-cutter neighborhood. Karen had made herself HOA president within 6 weeks and immediately started what she called community improvement initiatives. These included filing complaints about our farm animals, the ducks, demanding we install privacy fencing to block her view of our unsightly wheelchair access ramps, and insisting that our pond was a mosquito breeding ground that threatened property values. I tried to be polite. I'd explained that the ducks were domesticated, that our property wasn't part of her HOA, and that Sarah needed those accessibility features. But Karen wasn't interested in politeness or facts. She was interested in control. The harassment escalated over the weeks. Anonymous complaints to the county about neglected livestock. Certified letters demanding we remediate the waterfowl situation. Phone calls to animal control claiming we were running an illegal animal rescue. Each attack hurt Sarah more than the last. She'd worked so hard to build confidence after the accident, to feel useful and needed again. Karen's constant criticism made her question everything. "Maybe the ducks would be better somewhere else," Sarah had said last week, tears in her eyes after Karen's latest visit. "Maybe I'm not taking good enough care of them." "Sarah, honey," I'd said, kneeling beside her wheelchair, "you saved those ducks. They're happy and healthy because of you. Don't let anyone tell you different." But I could see the doubt creeping in and it broke my heart. This morning had started like any other. Sarah wheeled herself out to the pond around 8 a.m. with a bag of duck food and her favorite book. The ducks swam over immediately, quacking their hellos while she scattered their breakfast on the water. I was fixing a loose board on our porch when I heard the crunch of gravel that meant someone was coming up our long driveway. Karen's white Mercedes pulled up like she owned the place, and she climbed out wearing what looked like a business suit designed for battle. "This ends today," she announced, marching toward Sarah without even acknowledging me. "I've had enough of your wife's circus." Sarah looked up confused, holding a piece of bread she'd been about to throw to the ducks. "I'm sorry?" "Don't play innocent with me," Karen snapped. "Those disease-carrying birds are a public health hazard, and you're mentally incompetent to be making decisions about animal care." I started walking over, but Karen was just getting started. "I've done my research," she continued, pulling out a thick folder. "Your wife suffered brain damage in that accident. According to Texas state law, mentally disabled individuals cannot be left unsupervised around potential drowning hazards. I'm having her removed for her own safety." Sarah's face went white. The brain injury had left her sensitive about her cognitive abilities, and Karen had just struck at her deepest insecurity. I'm not mentally disabled," Sarah said quietly, her voice shaking. "I just process things differently now." "Same thing," Karen said dismissively. "The point is, you're a liability sitting out here alone. What if you fall out of that wheelchair into the water? What if those birds attack you? I won't have that kind of lawsuit waiting to happen in my community." That's when I reached them, and that's when Karen delivered her ultimatum. "You have 5 minutes to get your wife off my property, or I'm calling the police to drag her away." I watched Sarah's face crumple, watched her pull back from the ducks who were still swimming hopefully around her wheelchair, and felt something cold and dangerous settle in my chest. Karen pulled out her phone and started dialing 911, her voice switching to fake concern as she spoke to the dispatcher. "Emergency services? Yes, I need immediate police response at 1247 Meadowbrook Lane. We have a mentally disabled woman who's been left unsupervised near water and is refusing to leave community property. She appears to be having some kind of episode and may be a danger to herself." The lies poured out of her mouth like poison. Sarah wasn't having an episode, she was having her heart broken by a cruel woman who couldn't stand to see someone different finding joy in simple things. As Karen hung up, she turned to me with that smug smile that bullies wear when they think they've won. "The police will be here in 5 minutes, she said. "I suggest you prepare your wife for transport to appropriate facilities. Someone in her condition clearly can't be trusted to live independently." Sarah was crying now, quiet tears that she tried to hide by looking down at the water. The ducks sensed her distress and swam closer, making soft concerned sounds that would have been heartbreaking if it wasn't so beautiful. "Sarah," I said gently, kneeling beside her wheelchair, "look at me, honey." She raised her eyes, and I saw the same fear there that I'd seen in the hospital after the accident. The fear that she wasn't whole anymore, that she wasn't capable, that maybe everyone was right to treat her like a broken thing. "Karen thinks she knows what's best for you," I said loud enough for our tormentor to hear. "She thinks she can call the police and have you taken away like you're some kind of problem to be solved." Karen crossed her arms, satisfied. "I'm protecting everyone involved. Your wife needs professional supervision, not to be left alone with dangerous animals near water." I stood up slowly, pulling my wallet from my back pocket. For 8 months, I'd been Detective Lieutenant Marcus Webb on vacation, taking care of my wife and keeping my law enforcement career private. I'd wanted Sarah to heal in peace, away from the stress and danger of my real job. But sometimes peace isn't possible when you're dealing with predators. I flipped open my wallet and pulled out my badge, the gold shield catching the morning sunlight like a promise of justice. "Karen Mitchell," I said, my voice taking on the authority I'd kept hidden for months, "I'm Detective Lieutenant Marcus Webb, and you're under arrest for filing false police reports, harassment, and attempted fraud." The change in Karen's face was instant and beautiful. The smug confidence cracked like thin ice, replaced by confusion and growing panic. "You're what? You can't be serious. You're just some ranch hand." I smiled, reaching for my handcuffs. "Ma'am, you just called 911 and filed a false report claiming my wife was trespassing on your property. Problem is, we own this land free and clear, and it's never been part of any HOA jurisdiction. You also claim she was mentally incompetent and a danger to herself, which constitutes defamation of a disabled person under Texas Penal Code." The sound of sirens was getting closer. The police response that Karen had demanded was about to arrive. But not for Sarah. "Furthermore," I continued, "you've been conducting a sustained campaign of harassment against a disabled woman, which violates both state and federal disability rights laws. You threatened to have her forcibly removed from her own property, which constitutes attempted kidnapping. This is ridiculous. Karen sputtered, backing away from me. I'm the HOA president. I have authority here. Ma'am, your HOA has no jurisdiction over this property, and even if it did, threatening disabled residents would still be a crime. The first police car pulled into our driveway, followed by a second one. I recognized both Officers Rodriguez and Chen, good cops who I'd worked with on several cases. Detective Webb? Officer Rodriguez looked confused as he approached. We got a call about a disturbance. The disturbance is this woman harassing my wife, I said, gesturing to Karen, who was now pale and shaking. She filed a false police report claiming Sarah was trespassing and mentally incompetent. I have the whole conversation recorded on my phone. I pulled out my phone and played back Karen's 911 call, watching as the officer's expressions grew more serious with each lie she told. Ma'am, Officer Chin said to Karen, filing false police reports is a serious crime. You also use terms like mentally disabled and incompetent to describe someone who appears to be functioning normally. Do you have any medical training or authority to make those determinations? Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She's in a wheelchair. She has brain damage. I was protecting the community. From what? Rodriguez asked. From a woman feeding ducks on her own property? That's when Sarah spoke up, her voice quiet but clear. Officer, I was in a car accident 8 months ago. I do have some cognitive processing delays from a traumatic brain injury. But I'm not incompetent and I'm not a danger to anyone. These are my rescue ducks and this is my home. The simple dignity in her words made me so proud I could have burst. Despite everything Karen had said, despite the humiliation and fear, Sarah was standing up for herself. Officer Chen looked at Karen with obvious disgust. Ma'am, you called 911 to report a disabled woman for sitting in her own backyard? And you claimed she was trespassing on her own property? I have documentation. Karen insisted, pulling out her folder of fake HOA papers. The pond area is community property under the boundary amendments. Rodriguez examined the documents and shook his head. Ma'am, these appear to be falsified. The property records I can access from my car show this entire area belongs to Detective Webb and his wife. There's no HOA jurisdiction here. That's impossible, Karen said, but her voice was getting smaller. Ma'am, you're under arrest for filing false police reports, harassment, and fraud, Rodriguez said, pulling out his handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. As they read Karen her rights and led her to the patrol car, she turned back one last time with pure venom in her voice. This isn't over. I know people. I have connections. Your crazy wife will be in a home by the end of the week. But her threats rang hollow now, spoken from the back of a police car while her perfect hair fell apart and her makeup ran with tears of rage. After the police left with Karen in custody, Sarah and I sat by the pond watching the ducks swim in lazy circles. She was quiet for a long time, processing everything that had happened. Marcus, she finally said, why didn't you tell me you were still a detective? I took her hand, feeling the wedding ring that had somehow survived the accident that changed everything else. Because I wanted to give you space to heal without worrying about my job. Because I wanted you to feel safe. I do feel safe, she said, squeezing my fingers. Especially now. But Marcus, you can't keep hiding who you are to protect me. I fell in love with a cop, remember? I knew the risks when I married you. She was right, of course. Sarah had always been the stronger one between us, even before the accident. Especially after. Besides, she continued with a small smile, I kind of liked watching you arrest that awful woman. She had it coming. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. She really did. Over the next few weeks, the full scope of Karen's harassment campaign came to light. She'd been systematically targeting anyone in the area who didn't fit her vision of suburban perfection. An elderly man with a vegetable garden that she claimed attracted undesirable wildlife. A young mother whose children played too loudly in their own backyard. A veteran with PTSD whose service dog she'd reported as aggressive and unlicensed. The investigation revealed that Karen had been forging HOA documents for months, expanding the claim jurisdiction to include properties that had never been part of the development. She'd been collecting fees from confused homeowners and threatening legal action against anyone who questioned her authority. The district attorney charged her with multiple felonies, including fraud, harassment, and filing false police reports. But the charge that satisfied me most was the federal hate crime enhancement for targeting disabled individuals. During the trial, Sarah testified about the impact of Karen's harassment on her recovery and mental health. Her words were clear and strong, and when Karen's lawyer tried to suggest that people with brain injuries shouldn't be trusted to live independently, Sarah's response was perfect. "I may process information differently than I used to," she said, "but I know the difference between right and wrong. I know when someone is being cruel for no reason. And I know that feeding ducks in my own backyard isn't a crime, no matter what Mrs. Mitchell thinks." Karen was sentenced to 2 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution to all the families she'd harassed. The fake HOA was dissolved, and several real estate fraud charges were filed against the company that had been helping her forge documents. But the real victory was smaller and more personal. Sarah's confidence came back stronger than ever. She started a support group for people with traumatic brain injuries, meeting weekly by our pond with the ducks as unofficial therapy animals. She returned to substitute teaching, working with special needs children who needed someone who understood what it felt like to have your brain work differently. And every morning she still wheels herself out to the pond to feed her ducks and read them stories. Sometimes I join her, sitting on the grass beside her wheelchair and watching the water reflect the Texas sky. Karen Mitchell thought she could use fear and authority to control people who seemed vulnerable. She thought a disabled woman and her quiet husband would be easy targets. She was wrong about Sarah's strength, wrong about my patience, and wrong about what happens when bullies pick the wrong fight. The ducks are bigger now, confident and healthy, following Sarah around the property like a feathered honor guard. They know who saved them and they know who keeps them safe. Just like I know who saved me and just like I'll always keep her safe. Sometimes justice comes from unexpected places. Sometimes it comes from a badge that's been hidden too long. And sometimes it comes from the simple act of standing up to someone who thinks they can destroy the things you love. But it always comes. 6 months later, I watch Sarah wheel herself to the pond every morning, and I think about how close we came to losing this simple happiness. How close Karen came to taking away the one thing that brought my wife back to life. The property is peaceful now. The ducks are thriving. Sarah's laughter echoes across the water when they do something particularly amusing. And my badge sits proudly on the kitchen counter where I can see it every day, a reminder that sometimes protecting the people you love means showing exactly who you are. Karen Mitchell called the cops thinking she could have my wife taken away in 5 minutes. Instead, she learned that some fights you just can't win. Especially when you pick on a cop's wife.